right. Well, I'm excited that Cecil had this session this week because my son started school this morning, and I know I'm going to be sick next week. So I'm really excited that we had it this week because that could have been, really unfortunate. So I'm going to try not to bore you to death. I'm actually not a huge PowerPoint person, but they told me I had to have slides. So because usually the marketing team is a running joke. They're like, "Hey, where are your slides?" I'm like, "I don't have slides. I just want to have a conversation and talk." But you have we'll have slides today, but I promise you, I'm not going to read them to you. So how's that? So starting off, the first thing when I look at where we're at today, how many people, just show of hands, are familiar with Netskope? All right, good. So about half the people, so that's good. So how many people believe that we're just a CASB? All right, that's even better. Hey. So, when I look at Netskope, so I joined Netskope in March of this year from Schneider Electric, and often get the question, why did you join? And some of the things that I look at are some of the forcing functions in the market we have today. The first thing I look at, I talk about my kids. I have 4 kids, and I look at their digital acumen. And their digital acumen is, in many ways, higher than a lot of my IT teams that I had when I was in all of my CIO jobs. And a lot of it's because they're learning things like Python. My 14-year-old, last year in 7th grade, learned Python in his robotics class, right? And so we have this in our DNA of our people coming into the workforce. They have this digital acumen. And so this idea that we're going to be able to control everything digital and technology in our companies is just it's not sustainable. It's not something we can do. And so as technology leaders, we have to shift our mindset to how do we enable innovation at the edge of our company. I'm a big believer you always enable the people closest to the problem to solve it. So how do we enable those people with this digital acumen? They're not coming into IT roles or security roles. They're coming into finance, marketing, sales, operation roles. And they're going to want to solve problems. So how do we do that in a governed and secure way as well? And so that's some of the things we have to think about. We've also had this shift where, we went from 20% of our workforce was, traveling, so our salespeople, field people, executives, and 80% worked in an office, to almost 100% of our people, unless we're in manufacturing or retail, have now, gone to work from home or work from anywhere. And we all see I think every CEO and executive is worried about what's my return to work policy for my people that don't have to be in an office or don't have to be in a store or don't have to be in a plant. What am I going to communicate to those people, and what's the impact going to be? Am I going to lose 15% of my workforce? Am I going to lose a bunch of my data that's in my organization? Are customer lists going to go? Is data going to go from our organization? And so that, so our data, and the challenge is our data is not just sitting on servers, it's in our data centers anymore. It's sitting everywhere. It's in cloud applications, it's in cloud file storage, it's everywhere. And so because of that, that creates a much bigger threat for us. And then the other piece is, with people working everywhere, we don't control the networks at the Starbucks. We don't control the networks at the hotels. And so the attack surface we have, especially at home, how many people have separate internet connections at home for your work and your personal devices? Anybody? I do, but a lot of people don't, right? And so the kids are, my son, who plays Roblox, is downloading bots. And I'm like, son, you can't download bots to your computer because I have my corporate devices are also on the same network. And so I went and bought a separate network during COVID just to segment my devices. Now, our average employees aren't going to do that. And so all of these things are kind of forcing and creating an opportunity. And I said, hey, you know what? Netskope has got something really great, and I want to be a part of it. And so that's what caused me to want to join Netskope. And a couple of things I'll talk about later about that, but it's, I'll talk about, first we'll talk about the kind of this idea of we're moving from one center of data to these multiple centers of data. So data in Salesforce and our SaaS applications, data inside Box, Google Drive, OneDrive, Dropbox, your cloud file storage. You've got people building applications in AWS, Azure, GCP, Alibaba, if you've got groups over in China. And so our data is everywhere, right? And trying to understand where that's at. Are we violating privacy laws, right? Most people say, I've got GDPR compliance, and so because I've got European nationals working in the country. But what you don't realize is in Germany, only German employee data can only be seen by German citizens. And there's residency laws that are stricter in Germany than just GDPR. And so those are things that we have to take into account and apply the right protections so that data is not going the wrong places and we're creating exposure for us. Now, there's always a risk-reward conversation, right? How much does it cost to solve the problem versus what's the impact of the risk, right? And that's something that we're always looking at. So I'm going to jump forward. So how many people have heard the word SASE or Secure Access Service Edge? Right? I think it's like the new buzzword. You always love it because Gartner comes out with these terms and everyone says, oh, we do that. So this is like the new thing. It's interesting when I look at this because when I joined on and I met with Sanjay, our CEO, and he talked about SASE, he said, well, they sat down with Gartner 4 years ago And they said, hey, we've got this, here's what we're doing at Netskope, and here's our vision for the company. And when they showed it to the Gartner, when they talked about it, the Gartner analyst said, well, here's how we think the market's going to go. And they drew a picture on a whiteboard. And then our head of product marketing at the time turned his laptop screen around and said, look at this drawing, it looks just like yours. And so I like to say we're SASE before SASE was cool. So that's that's a really cool part to be a part of. We're going to talk about zero trust in a minute, but really SASE is an architecture. It's not a product. It's interesting. People say that we have a SASE product, and it's not a product. It's an architecture. In fact, it's a combination of multiple different products from potentially different companies coming together to provide a solution to solve a set of problems that we're facing today. Zero trust, it's a mechanism for delivering zero trust, and I'm going to talk about zero trust because I feel like, again, it's one of our field CTOs put an article out that said zero trust is an adjective in search of a noun, right? And I really think that resonates, and so we'll talk about that again in just a minute. So if we look at what is the problem that Secure Access Service Edge is solving. So we've got users that want to access applications. Those applications can be running either externally in SaaS or web. They can be applications that run in our data centers. They can be, or they can be an infrastructure as a service, platform as a service. And I put those on the internal app side because generally if I'm building something in AWS, it's not an external app. That's an internal app. It's just not running in a building that I control. And so then we've got, go forward here. We've got all of these different connections, the ways people are connecting to these different things, depending on where they work. In the last year, as we went through the COVID pandemic, and as we get out of the pandemic to this hybrid way of working, people are continuing to work in all these different areas. And so then we started deploying all these different point solutions to protect ourselves, whether it be web application firewalls, and we deployed secure web gateways, and everything around, how we protect our users. We had, I don't know about, those in the room, but I know everyone, when we pivoted to work from home, VPN was a big problem for us because we didn't have our VPN infrastructure was scoped for 20% of our workers, not 100%. So overnight, everyone's working from home, and now we're trying to scale up all of our VPN concentrators so we can get more people connected. I actually had to create a Tableau dashboard that showed what our actually connectivity was and how much we were scaling it up, and had to have a daily call with our CEO to talk about how we were helping support that pivot to work from home. And the challenge was a lot of the security stack that we've deployed over time has been deployed in our networks. It's been deployed as an appliance. There may be a mixture of cloud solutions with agents on the machine. So we got agent bloat that's going on our machines as well. And so when COVID happened, we continued to say, well, to keep our people safe, we have to connect back to our data centers so that we can route them through all of our security appliances and things we've invested in for them to get out to whether it's a web application, a SaaS application, what have you. And so that's the problem that we're trying to address, because do I really want that traffic running back through my data center and then back out? Why not just go direct to net? But how do I do that in a safe way? And so when you think about the rationalization of that, there's really two pieces, right? So and this is, Gartner has actually further defined this. So the two pieces is there's a security service edge, which is essentially your cloud edge. So think about all those different types of capabilities from a security standpoint, inspecting web traffic, replacing VPN with a private access solution, right? So instead of having a separate VPN agent for accessing my data center or accessing my applications in AWS, and then a separate application for scanning my web traffic, and then other applications for doing DLP on top of that. Now I've got all these agents, right? Most people that run service desks, how many people have gone to your people that run endpoints and they've said, yeah, give me more agents to put on a machine. I love agents. Let's put as many on our machines as possible. That just doesn't happen, right? I was in San Diego earlier this week, and I was meeting with one of our customers, and they said, you're in a good position because you're already on all our machines. We don't, putting agents on is like, you got to really get high approval to do that. And so with this architecture with SASE, what you're basically doing is you have an agent deployed on someone's machine that's essentially steering traffic to that cloud edge. Because again, we don't control the network they're connecting on when they're working in a place that's not our office. And so because that traffic we need that cloud edge to then inspect that traffic, look for data. We read about mass resignation, right? So all these people are going to leave because they don't like our return to work policy. And so there's going to be people that are going to leave, and some of those people are going to take data with them. They're going to have salespeople are going to take customer list. People are going to have employee data that's on thumb drives that they've downloaded they're going to download to their machines or they've been exchanging. So we're going to have all this data that's potentially going to be leaving our organization. One of the things that was really exciting when I looked into this was around coaching users, because it's people will say we standardize on this solution for cloud file storage, and then people go use a different one. right? And then we typically post up a message that says, you should only use this for personal use. And then people then turn around and store all their corporate data in there because they want to work from their home computer that weekend. So yeah, no one's going to say anything. I'll just dump it over here. But when you start asking people, why are you doing that, right? So why are you taking the data there? And they have to put justification in. That next level step, gets them to act a bit different. And the other piece is being able to coach users. One of the things, really resonated when Code 42 was up earlier talking about, internal risk. I fully agree with the fact that the risk we have, it's not the malicious user. We've got great tools to find the malicious person. Where we have challenges is the unintentional person. It's the person that just goes along their day and they do things. They take the security awareness training that we force them to take because they love to take security awareness training. They remember it for long enough to pass the test at the end, and they go back to business as usual, and they make all those unintentional mistakes. And so one of the questions I always look at is how do we improve the security hygiene of our people? And that's one of the things you can look at here as well, because we're observing, and that's where the UEBA brought up earlier, right? What's my individual behavior score? That allows me then to inspect all that traffic that's coming from the user to understand, are they a high-risk user or a low-risk user? And I can start to understand that and then start to coach them so I can understand the hygiene of my users. Do they have good security hygiene? Do they have good digital hygiene? Are they good digital citizens for our company? Because again, if we go back to the whole point earlier about we have people with more digital acumen than we've ever had before entering the workforce, we want to make sure that they're good digital citizens and not creating more risk and exposure for us as a company. One of the things that was interesting, I was talking to a head of HR about this, and I said, she asked, what does Netskope do? And I said, well, and then we were just sitting at a restaurant at a bar, and I was waiting for dinner, and she said, what does Netskope do? And I said, well, let me tell it to you this way. If you had someone, what's your biggest worry right now? She goes, well, I'm worried about our return to work policy. And I said, okay. So what if you could look at, the minute you announce your new return to work policy, you could go look at how many people across functions are going to job boards or social media immediately after the post of the job went out. That'd be good data to be able to go look at to understand the impact of the decisions we're making. And those are some of the things you get when you start wrapping analytics around this cloud edge when you're looking at traffic. Now, the other piece on here is the WAN service edge, and so one of the questions I've gotten before is how important is SD-WAN in this? And it's, if you're in retail, if you're in manufacturing and you've got physical locations, SD-WAN is extremely important. I was talking to a CIO in Europe for one of our customers about 2 months ago, and we were having our first introduction call and said, where are you at in your SD-WAN journey? And he said, he goes, well, that got deprioritized because we went to work from home, so it hasn't, been a big issue for us. And I said, okay. I said, well, what about when you get back in the office? I said, because if you're still running on MPLS networks and people go back into an office, I guarantee you're going to get people complaining about why is my Microsoft Teams so much slower in the office than it is at home? And it's because you're routing all that traffic over your corporate network that's not optimized for the O365 experience. And he goes, you know what, it's strange you said that. I had an executive that went into our office in London this morning, and they sent me a note saying, why is Teams so horrible in the office? It worked great for me at home. He goes, I said, well, you better go call your infrastructure team and get SD-WAN bumped up on the list. And so I would encourage you, SD-WAN is a key piece of this, but it matters where you have people working in an office. If you see the note there, you see that's actually a Netskope logo inside that little bubble. That's the agent. So we actually connect into, this architecture, you steer traffic to that cloud edge from the SD-WAN router. So if someone's in an office, you're going to then steer that traffic there. But if they're not in an office, you still need to be able to steer that traffic. And so that's where the agent gets deployed to the machine. There's this notion, if you go look it up, I think Gartner has mentioned a little bit, it's called cybersecurity mesh, which is this concept that you basically have cloud edge everywhere around the world, and you've got people with an agent on their machine that's connecting to the closest edge wherever you're at in the world. And so you'll see some articles coming out about that in research in the next year. But this is, so if you think about that WAN service edge, think about all the things that traditionally said on the network side around, the WAN optimization, so the riverbeds and things of the world. Those are the things that are going to sit at that WAN service edge, and then that's connecting to your cloud edge, which is with your users, whether they're in an office or they're in a coffee shop, a hotel, from home, what have you. So zero trust. So this one is, when I tell people this is a journey, I get asked, I've been on a few calls since I joined, they said, how do we deploy zero trust? And I said, well, it's really a mindset. And I said, the challenge is, there's not a one-size-fits-all approach. I try to tell everyone, if there's playbooks or run books on how exactly you do this, like just follow these 5 easy steps and you're going to be, you've got this implemented. And the challenge is we're all nuanced, right? We've all got, I don't know about you, but fortunately at Netskope I don't have this, but when I was at Schneider, I had mainframes that supported billions of dollars in business. I had mid-range systems, right? So there's nuances that make my zero trust journey different than the next company. No two companies are alike, we're all nuanced. So, zero trust isn't a product or a destination, but it's a journey, because we're going to continually have new applications, new things that come in our environment. We're going to make acquisitions. We're going to make divestitures. Our business is going to pivot, and we have to continue to have that zero trust mindset. Now, I would tell you that, if I go talk to my CEO about zero trust, I work for a cybersecurity company, but if I'm in manufacturing or other industries, that may come across with a negative connotation. They'd say, does that mean I don't trust my employees? Is that what that means? And really what I do is it's really shifting from this mindset of trust but verify to verify then trust. We can't just assume that just because they're an employee of the company that we can trust everything they do, because they're going to make unintentional mistakes that they don't know are creating harm, but they just do. And so we have to then apply the right adaptive trust to that. So we'll talk about what that means in a minute. But the first thing, when we think about zero trust, we talk about how do I start that journey? And I talk about these 4 different dimensions. The first one is personas. Because a lot of times people would say, let's go deploy this one principle across the entire organization for all employees. The challenge with that is, I guarantee you go forward a year from now, you're probably going to be in the same place, trying to figure out how you get that one capability deployed across all your employee base. But instead, divide up your personas of users. What applications do they use? What data do they access? What are the integration flows that you have? What devices are they connecting from? So a good one to start with would be like sales. Most of our sales organizations live largely in SaaS applications. Their quotation tools, depending where you're at, may be running in AWS. It may be something that's more modern. It may be running off your ERP systems if they're doing quotations. But generally speaking, the tech stack that the salespeople are going to use is going to be more supportive of a zero trust mindset or approach than, say, someone working on the manufacturing floor. Right? Those are very different personas. And so start with those personas. And I've, since this is Texas, there's a gentleman. There was a book, The Total Money Makeover. Anybody read that book? The guy does the radio show on the weekends, and he talks about, you've got to have names escaping me for a minute. I'm sure someone in the audience knows. But when you look at that, it's basically, you don't just pay off the credit card that has the highest interest rate. You pay off the one with the lowest balance, and you get momentum. And then you keep that momentum going forward. And so that's where, when you think about a zero trust journey, you think about these architectures, the belief is, how do I get enough information to get started and get moving and incrementally get better? And so what I'd say is, in whatever you do, get an agile mindset. So stack up, where do I get the most return for the least amount of effort? And get that momentum, so when you fast forward a year, after you've asked for funding for a program around this, and your CEO or your CFO says, well, how much progress have we made? You can say, well, we got all these wins in, right? The first thing you want to do is, quick wins are always good. So how do I get quick wins? How do I get momentum in my organization? So use an agile mindset in what you do, and combine your agile mindset with a zero trust mindset. Now, everyone asks, what's an implementation strategy? So I put this slide in there just for that purpose, right? And really, if you look at this, it should be a circle, right? So I've given some feedback that we need to turn this into a circle, because I feel like we're always in a constant discovery mode. We're constantly having new applications, new changes, pivots happening in our organization that we need to respond to. We have to make sure we prioritize and align to our business teams, because if we just go make a change that impacts all of our users and we don't communicate it effectively, then what happens is these fiery emails come flying across over at from the executive team. So, for the CISOs and the CIOs in the room, you're going to get those emails from the CEO going, people can't work, they're not productive, what did you do? And then you have to roll back the change. And so you kind of lose some of that trust, right? And so in the sake of trust, I always say, every relationship is like a bank. I tell my kids this. Every relationship's like a bank. Every time you do something good, you make it a deposit. Every time you do something bad, you make a withdrawal. Make sure your relationship has a positive balance in it. Make sure that bank has a positive balance, and that builds trust, right? So those wins and getting that momentum, and not making big changes that impact all your users in a negative way, where you get the CEO saying, hey, we got to revert that change back, that makes a withdrawal, right? So internally, you have to build trust as well when you roll out these programs, and communication is a key way to do that. So the next piece is, we'll talk about continuous adaptive trust. And you may ask, why do you have a hotel logo on the slide, picture on the slide? And when I look at where the industry has been, when we think about SaaS traffic, web traffic, all these different things our users are going to, it's typically stopped at the point of, can the person get to the hotel? Do they have a room at the hotel? Yep, they can go to the hotel. Well, what do they do when they're in the hotel? Do they have VIP status? Can they get to the executive lounge? Do they get free breakfast? Do they get access to free Wi-Fi? Do they have access to the minibar? What do they have when they're in the hotel? What are they doing when in the hotel? What room are they in the hotel? Right? And so when I use that as an example, because when we think about things like OneDrive as an example, the O365 tenant or environment looks the same regardless, which customer you are. So if you just look at the destination, it's a hotel, it's OneDrive. But now someone mistakenly all the time copies data from what they intend to go to their corporate OneDrive ends up in their personal OneDrive. And you can substitute whatever cloud storage you want because all SaaS applications work in that way. They have tenants. They have an instance of the application. It's not just automatically directing you. You have different instances. And it's easy, especially in companies that have lots of acquisitions where you have multiple tenants, you haven't consolidated them yet. It's important to apply that policy to that. And so what we have to do is shift our mindset from not just the destination, a hotel, but what is the person doing while they're there? Is this a risky user? If they're a risky user, I may treat how they interact with employee data, what they can store, what they can download differently than someone that's not as risky. And so I have to continually monitor what those people are doing to make sure they're not doing something I don't want them to do and creating unintended consequences for our companies. So when I look at a model here, and this is something that we put together to kind of explain this mindset, it's really thinking about what's the data that I'm trying to access, who is the person, what device are they connecting from, and then what application is it going to? And the more sensitive the data is, the stronger posture I'm going to have against that. I'm going to require different levels of authentication, right? If someone's trying to get to highly classified information on an unmanaged device, that's not going to happen, right? So this adaptive trust model says, I'm not going to apply the same level of trust to every single interaction someone has. I'm going to adapt the trust based on all the different vectors and the different things that I know about that person. So the next piece we go to is I look at, okay, how does this look from a model standpoint, right? So if I think about those different pieces, where is the person working from? What device? What instance of an application? It's not just Salesforce. Is it the right Salesforce instance? Is it the right OneDrive instance? Is it the right Box instance? The right Dropbox instance? Which one is it? And then it's applying policy to it. One of the things when I joined over at Netskope, when I was going through when I first joined on, and I said, so tell me about our architecture. How do we build this out? And they said, we've got POPs all over the world. I said, oh, are they running in public cloud like AWS or Azure? They said, no. I said, well, why? And it just so happens the gentleman that architected our network used to run global infrastructure for AWS. And he said, well, the reason why is because when we built AWS, and it's the same thing with Microsoft, same thing with GCP, we built it to run applications, not route traffic. And he said, when you're looking at just is the destination right, that I can probably get by with just being inside public cloud. But the minute that I start continuously looking at every interaction, milliseconds start to matter because now I'm impacting the experience that my employees have, my users have with my applications. If I add 2 milliseconds onto every single interaction someone has, that starts to create an experience. You start doubling, tripling, quadrupling that, that's a really bad experience. And then people want to turn off the security. And he said, the bottom line is don't let performance be the reason people turn off security. And so we built out a global network that everything's tied on, and it's built around routing traffic and inspecting traffic at the cloud edge. Right, and that's why that was built. So I thought the answer was really good. I said, hey, okay, that makes a lot of sense, coming from an IT background. So this is continuous adaptive trust. It's basically that continuous inspection, that circular process, looking at every interaction someone does and everything they do from a SaaS application to web application, and what the interaction is. Are they posting a file? Are they downloading a file? Are they sending a message? Are they receiving a message? What is it they're doing? And then applying policy to that. So key takeaways. First off, again, zero trust is a mindset. Right? It's not a product. It's not a destination. Right? When I went through agile transformations, I always had people say, "When are we done?" I said, "Never. It's a journey we're going to be on. We're going to be on this journey. We're going to be on this journey forever. We're going to iteratively get better because the only constant in the world is change." And so, I think I would love to coin a new term called the zero trust agile mindset, or maybe the continuous adaptive agile mindset. I don't know. Seems kind of long. We'll probably come up for an acronym because people love acronyms. SASE is an architecture, right? It's not a product either, right? And it enables a zero trust journey. So as you go on that journey, SASE is the architecture that helps you go on that journey. And then when you apply the continuous adaptive trust, is essentially now inspecting everything that person does, right? Those are the key takeaways. Right? And so, we want to continue to make our decisions based on the risk of the user. So if we have users that are doing things that we don't want them to do and their security score goes down, we want to adapt our policy for that person, again, to make sure that we're making a different risk-based decision based on what that person does. A few best practices. The first thing is break down your silos. I had an article that I put out a couple months ago about kind of networking and security teams and how we need to, have those teams working collaboratively together, cross-functionally together, because there's this convergence happening. happening. And I look back at COVID, and overnight when COVID first hit and we had to pivot to work from home, everyone forgot about who they reported to. We just said, we got to get people working safely from home as quickly as possible. I was with the person I was with earlier this week. We talked about VPN. He's like, I turned my DR site into another VPN location just so I could get my people to connect. So overnight, everyone forgot about org charts and just said, how do we get our best people on this problem and go solve it? And that's something we can't lose as we move forward. We can't go back in our silos because they're comfortable. It's comfortable to be in our silo, but we have to break out of those. The second one is we have to focus on the employee experience. If you start doing things that make the users have a subpar experience, people are going to reject the change. They're going to disable the security. So it's the worst thing to go invest millions of dollars in security programs and security technology to have people just turn it off. Right? That was like my heart would burn when I was at Schneider and someone would say they just disabled the web filtering, disabled the VPN. I'm like, it made me a little panic attack going on. The next one is make data-driven decisions, right? I think if you look at what are the top priorities for companies, cybersecurity and data analytics, I think are the top two in most CIO, most executive list from an IT standpoint. Security has to be baked into all of our transformations, but we have to get the data to guide those transformations. We have to make data-driven decisions. So use the data, use what you learn to help you figure out what the next challenge or problem you're going to face is and how you're going to address it. And the last one, pick the right partners. The key thing there is when you think about partners, and Mimecast is one, and I have one slide that talks about all of those pieces I'll show in a second. But make sure you work with partners that have an open API first strategy. Because what you don't want to do is bring in a company and then have to rip out and replace everything you've already bought and put something else in. Now, there may be some consolidation opportunities over time, but you make that decision. But what you want is things that are open and API first, so they integrate with your existing investments. And so this slide kind of shows, how we fit into that. So when you think about identity, plug your identity provider in. We work with them on that side. But then, Mimecast partners with us, and so we exchange. When we think about email as one of our different, threat vectors that we've got in our organization, that's where Mimecast comes in as a partner. And so we work with the CrowdStrikes. We work with the different endpoint companies, whether it's EDR, XDR. We work with all of them, right? And that's because we firmly believe that we have to have an open ecosystem and an open API approach to how we work in order to support our customers, because we don't want to say, I know you just invested $1 million last year in that product, or $2 million, $3 million, pick a number. Now we need you to rip and replace that with something else, because that usually doesn't go over well with the CFO, unless there's some really compelling event for why you need to do it, right? And so that's one of the things to do. So I'm going to end on time, and I don't know if we're doing questions or not. Happy to take them if we have any, but this is my information. Feel free to reach out. That's my email. I actually changed my Twitter handle. It used to be different, but marketing people said they need to be the same, but the one I had was not available, so they said put an underscore in front. I don't know if underscores work, but they said it did. So that's what I did. So that's my information. I'm happy I'll be here most of the day today. Happy to chat with anybody if you have questions. Hopefully this was helpful and useful. I didn't see anybody sleeping or nodding off, so that's usually a good sign. So thank you very much.